Hello and welcome to episode 19 of Abbott and Costello Meet the Podcast. I'm Jerry Shario, and today we will be discussing the film Time of Their Lives. And right now I'd like to introduce to you author, playwright, actor, musician, the man who puts the pro in procrastination, Nick Santamaria.
I think I'll say hello later.
Okay.
Okay, now. Hello, how are you? I'm sorry, I was procrastinating.
Yes, well, there you are.
Okay, well, I'm really not a procrastinator by nature.
No, you're not.
No, I'm a person that once I have a project, it's got to get done before I can go to another project. So I'm kind of good that way. Yeah, I was that way in school, too, when I was there. I was actually the youngest person in my grammar school to cut school.
Excuse me?
I'm serious. I cut school, and it was quite a thing when I got caught. It was
oh, wow.
Yeah, I got a very short haircut from my mom, which she knew would kill me because I had long hair,
Yep.
And my teacher faced my desk the opposite way for about a month.
Oh, my gosh. How old were you?
I was 26, and I was in fourth grade. And no, actually, I was in fourth grade. I was, 9, 10?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and I was out and about, just walking around, going to stores, Anyway, I was a bad boy. I'm a bad boy.
I've heard that somewhere before.
She calls him a bad boy.
Yes,
I
yes.
love that.
And I love the look on his face when she does it. It's almost like, hey, that's my line.
Yeah, how come I didn't say it? Yeah. Okay, well, let's get going.
Yes.
I got a little guff from a couple of people when I mentioned that this movie, above all Abbott and Costello movies, is the one people love when they don't love Abbott and Costello. Mm-hmm. For non-Abbott and Costello fans, this is the movie. Okay. Yeah. And it makes sense because it is not an Abbott and Costello movie. In fact, it's very different. Yeah. It's even different from Little Giant, mm-hmm. the previous film where they tried something different. They split up the team. This was first worked on as a treatment in 1944. 2 years before filming began. And that was by Val Burton, the producer and writer, also a songwriter. He wrote the story as not a little tinker. Lou Costello played Horatio Prim, and Melody Allen, the Marjorie Reynolds character. This was written for kind of a dandy, a dandy from those days, and his African-American servant.
Oh.
So, yeah. And I'm thinking they probably had Bob Hope in mind and Willie Best because they were so good in Ghostbreakers and Nothing But the Truth and a few other movies. Bob Hope loved working with Willie Best. And that almost sounds like if you put a comma there, he liked working with Willie Best. But anyway, so once they gave it to Walter de Leon, who wrote on Little Giant, and a guy by the name of Bradford Ropes, like tying ropes, like noose. Bradford Ropes, very, very interesting fellow, born in 1905, passed away way too young in 1966. He is the writer of the novel that they based 42nd Street on, the movie and the play. He wrote the novel, the original novel, and it was very adult. There were gay characters, there was drug use. I mean, it was different.
Okay.
Yeah. He also he wrote from his own experience. He was in show business, and he wrote from his own experience. He wrote another book that was made into a movie by MGM called Stage Mother, and that had a bit part by Larry Fine of the Three Stooges. Oh. Which is really the only reason it's remembered at all. And then he wrote a book called Go Into Your Dance, which became, in 1935, a Warner Brothers movie starring then married couple, miserable married couple, Ruby Keeler and Al Jolson. Ruby. They did not, she did not like him at all. She left him a couple of years later, took their adopted baby and changed its name, leaving Jolie on his knee. He lost his sonny boy. Anyway, he also wrote Bradford Ropes. He wrote Westerns. He worked with Laurel and Hardy, writing one of their worst films, Nothing But Trouble.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, at MGM. And he came back for The Boys in their next film, Buck Privates Come Home, which is quite a good one. And then John Grant got an additional dialogue by John Grant. Now,
Yes.
I will give anybody, I'll give you $5 if you could point out where his dialogue falls in this film. I couldn't find it anywhere. There was no mustard. There was no blackboard with 7 times 13 using first. There were no burlesque routines. There were no crosstalk routines. I'm thinking maybe in the prologue when they actually are working together, maybe he was in on some of that dialogue. There's the thing where Lou is looking at the trunk with Bud, and Bud says, "Lift the lid," and he takes his hat and lifts it up.
Yes.
I mean, that's really cute. That could have been John Grant for all we know. But anyway, those are the writers, and a fine group they were. Let's talk about the director. This is probably the most important person on the film. Charlie Barton. He did 9 films with the Boys. This was their first with Charlie. Fascinating guy. He was about 5'1", actually. He was very, very small. He worked in vaudeville. He became a prop boy for director James Cruise. And then he became assistant director to the great William Wellman. And they became very close. He directed his first film in 1934. I believe it was a B Western. Eventually, he went to Columbia for a stint directing B pictures there. And then he was signed by Universal in 1945. And he made a couple of movies before he met up with Bud and Lou. And that became sort of a cottage industry for him. He really, out of all the directors, he knew how to handle them. He was friendly with them. And he encouraged the fun on the set. So he was the ideal director for the Boys. But there's trouble. I have to bring up something that my co-writer on the book, The Annotated Abbott and Costello, which is a great New Year's present, by the way. It mentions that he's quoting, what's his name? The guy who wrote Bud and Lou, Bob Thomas.
Yeah.
The usually fair Bob Thomas quotes Charlie Barton, telling this story. Charlie Barton says that they were shooting a couple of days without Lou. Lou was home, and they were shooting with Bud. And that one night, Lou called him at home, and he was absolutely, completely angry. He was pissed off. He wanted Bud's role. He said, "I want to play Bud's role, and he can play my role." And they had shot already for a few weeks, and Charlie's like, "Lou, we can't go back and reshoot. We just don't have the budget to go back and reshoot." "I'm sorry, Charlie. Sorry, Charlie. You do it, or I don't come in." And apparently, according to this story, Lou did not come in for 2 weeks and then wandered in one day like nothing happened. Now, this makes about as much sense, as 7 times 13. He could be temperamental. Lou knew his worth to the studio. Lou did resent some of the executives and how he was treated, knowing that he was supporting them and their kids' college educations. But he wasn't a moron.
Yeah.
Okay? He was not a moron. Okay, here's the deal. He had to read the script. They were known for not reading the scripts and coming in and doing their routines and blah, blah, blah. This is a script you had to learn. He read the script. He knew that he had the starring part. He knew he had the more interesting part. He knew he was the star of the movie and that Bud was playing an inflated supporting role or roles. So why would he possibly want Bud's role? So here's my theory, and I believe it's also Matthew Conium's, and I think you agree, Jerry, is that the movie itself went over schedule, coincidentally, 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, I'm thinking this is Charlie Barton's very first film with the Boys, and he finds himself 2 weeks over schedule. How interesting and how convenient to blame Lou for that, based on Lou's past reputation or whatever. Yeah. Let's face it, the special effects took a lot longer than they thought. And that took up a lot of that 2 weeks. People got sick and didn't come in. And also, while they were shooting outdoors, there were these bugs making noise in the bushes, and they couldn't shoot. They couldn't shoot around that. And they had to figure out a way to, get around that. So this was the 2 weeks that Charlie Barton was blaming Lou for.
Yeah.
Lou was not. He was a pro. I'm sorry, but he was a pro. Yeah. And he would have never done that. Never. So what do you think, Jer?
Well, I'm in full agreement. This does not sound like something that he would do for all the reasons you stated, obviously. Mm-hmm. And it does bring up a point, though, somewhat related. It's interesting to me that in both Little Giant and Time of Their Lives, obviously they're not a team. Quite obviously, Lou's got the leading role. Mm-hmm. And in both of them, Bud plays two characters.
Right.
Was that a way to say, he's got the lead, but here's an extra bone for you,
I actually believe that. I believe that they gave him two roles because had they given him one supporting role, it would have been just a supporting role.
Yeah.
Lou was the star of these two pictures. To give him two parts was to beef up what he was doing.
Yeah.
It was more impressive. And I'll tell you, in both films, both characters are completely different.
Yes.
He plays a miserable bastard in the first part of the film, and just like Little Giant, and then plays a very lovable character, in the second part of the film.
And very funny as well, my gosh.
Oh, my God. I think he's at his funniest in this movie. Be calm, be reasonable. He's so funny. He really is. And he comports himself so well. It doesn't matter that he's playing, a somewhat supporting role.
Yeah.
Because he's so damn good. And you know what? Lou did an interview during this film, and he actually said, I never realized what a good actor he was or is. Yeah. Yeah. So he was paying Bud a nice compliment there.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm wondering, we should just get to the film, and I'll get to the actors. I've got some wonderful information about the actors.
Cool.
And we'll get to them as we get to them, and I'll just go back to my notes and tell you about them. So the Universal logo that usually sounds like is now part of the opening credit music, and it's very delightful. It's really nice. I love that tune. It's really, really nice. But anyway, you see pictures of them at the very top where you see Bud Abbott and Lou Costello. There's two beautiful pictures of them in their three-cornered hats, Bud in his white wig, in their revolutionary clothes. It's very nice. And then we see directed by Charlie Barton for the very first time.
Talking about the billing. The opening credits. Something that struck me in the billing was you had, Abbott and Costello. You had Marjorie Reynolds. Blanked on her first name for a second there. And then you get the and a dozen other people. And that's where John Shelton shows up. His name shows up. He's technically the romantic lead. Not that there really is one in this, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do. He's billed far below where he should be. Yeah.
I found that very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The interesting thing for me in this cast is that Marjorie Reynolds was well, actually, she was kind of on her way down at this point. Her biggest thing was Holiday Inn, and 4 years earlier. Yeah. But we'll get to her.
Yeah.
But yeah, John Shelton was not a big star. He's playing a nice role here, but he's not a big star by any means.
Yeah, he comes after Marjorie Reynolds and Benny Barnes, too.
Right. You got to realize that, again, Marjorie Reynolds was a name, and Benny Barnes was a name.
Yep.
She was a star supporting player. So it's got a great cast. It's really got a wonderful cast. So we open up at a party. They're dancing disco to the minuet. No, they're all dancing to the minuet. It's really
Yeah.
nice. The camera comes into the window and you see them. And there's a couple of guys talking about Marjorie Reynolds, who happens to be quite beautiful. This is Danbury Manor, owned by Tom Danbury. He's engaged to Melody Allen, who is Marjorie Reynolds, our leading lady. This takes place in Kings Point, New York, in 1780, the 5th year of the Revolutionary War. Okay, so I think one of the guys who's discussing her is Roger Corman regular Myron Healy, I think, and Kirk Allen, who was Superman, the original, the very first movie Superman. And a friend of mine actually lived in his old apartment in Hollywood, believe it or not. So anyway, they're dancing, they're doing their thing. And then we meet Bud. We meet Cuthbert. And Cuthbert is a bastard. He is just evil. He's introduced. It's a very funny gag, actually, when he's introduced. He's the butler. And he comes out to the party, and he's got this wonderful bottle of brandy on the tray with a glass. And he walks up to this very, very stuffy gentleman. And the gentleman says,
Do you recommend this vintage, my man?
Oh, yes, it's delicious. That is, so the other guests have told me.
and then he walks out, looking very sheepish. And then goes for another drink in the kitchen. There he's met by Nora. Now, Nora is played by Ann Gillis, who we met in Society under personal contract to Lou. They had to borrow her from him, which meant he made a few bucks. And she plays Nora, his beloved. And I'm talking about Lou's beloved. Bud also wants her. Cuthbert wants her too. But she wants nothing to do with Cuthbert. So it's so funny. The way they talk about Lou before he comes on, that fat, lazy... Even the maid who comes in to tell Nora that he's on his way here, she says, who? And she indicates a big stomach and big fat cheeks.
Yep.
So Lou's the fat little tinker. And Bud says, oh, that fat, lazy tinker. And she says, he's the most wide-awake tinker in the colonies. And you cut to Lou in semi-close-up, sound asleep on his horse, laying back on his horse with a blanket and everything. And it's so funny. And as he's getting up, the horse is going into a barn, and he hits his head on the top of the barn, falls off, goes into a pile of hay, comes onto him, and where he gets hay fever and starts sneezing like crazy. Well, Nora hears him and goes into the barn, and she gives him a big kiss, and he falls backwards onto the hay, and he's obviously affected.
Nora.
Oh, Horatio, do my kisses soothe you that much?
I'm sitting on a pitchfork.
Oh, for heaven's sake. Here, so get up.
Nora! Nora!
And he's not just sitting on a pitchfork. This thing is halfway in, And she pulls it out, and you hear that spring noise, that Universal had.
Yep.
It's just so funny. Anyway, they are planning on eloping. Now, Nora works for Tom Danbury, and she would have to break her bond. Now, I'm not quite sure what that's all about. It must have been something that was going on back then, almost like slavery in a way. You had to pay your way to freedom. You know what I mean? So Bud overhears them. And Lou has a letter from George Washington, from General George Washington, saying he's the best tinker in town, and that what's a tinker? A tinker is a guy who repairs the pots and pans, luggage, latches, things like that. He's a tinker. And so George Washington gives him a letter of recommendation, calling him a patriot as well. Mm-hmm. And this letter plays in as the most important element to this story. So we are focused on the letter, and so is Cuthbert. So Cuthbert wants to keep them from going away. He knows that if they elope, Nora will break her bond, and she could be put in jail for that. So could Horatio, Lou. So what does he do? When Nora leaves, he goes in and pretends to be the good loser. And, the better man won and blah, blah, blah. So he says, I think you'll do better with Master Danbury if you fix his trunk for him. There's a hole in the bottom and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, he kicks Lou into the trunk and locks it, and then runs to tell Master Danbury what they were planning on doing, like the rat that he is. Now, this was a little unsettling for me. He walks into the room to tell Danbury, who's there with a couple of his friends, about what's going on. And Danbury doesn't have time. No, Cuthbert, get out. Just get out. He chases him out of the room. And it's a little uncomfortable for me to see, actors of that status pushing Bud around. It's just weird. But anyway, Tom Danbury is a traitor. In fact, he's in line with Benedict Arnold. And these are two of his minions. Nora somehow ends up in the closet. Oh, she hears people coming and she gets in the closet. So she overhears their plans. But so does Marjorie Reynolds, who is engaged to Tom Danbury. She's hearing this for the very first time. Now, this is what happens. Lou is in the trunk. Bud is whatever. He's waiting for Master Danbury to tell on him. And so Marjorie Reynolds, Melody, figures she has to do something. She has to warn the American army, the colony army, that this is going on, that they're going into a trap. Okay, so she dresses up like a man. She puts on trousers. She's got boots on. She's got a beautiful blouse. It's sexy, actually. Quite sexy in that outfit. Boy, oh boy. And she puts a cape on. She has not a small chicken. I mean a real cape. And she puts on a three-cornered hat. So she looks like a man. She goes into the barn and she finds Lou, whose legs have come through the trunk and his head has come through the other side. He looks like a walking trunk. And she lets him out and tells him what's going on. Nora has the letter. She was going to bring it to Tom Danbury to show him that he's a patriot and, blah, blah, blah. So they decide they're going to go together. They're going to warn the American army, and they set out on their horses. And Lou is backwards, of course, and they're riding towards the army that is coming. Major Putnam, the American major, is coming with his troops. So here's what happens. Marjorie Reynolds and Lou, Horatio and Melody, believe that the army they see in the distance is the British army. So they start shooting at them. And the army, the American army, thinks that they are the British spies, and they start shooting at them. So it's a total misunderstanding. But they end up killing Lou and Marjorie Reynolds. Now, when I was a kid, it was like, what?
Yep.
You killed them? And not only did they shoot them dead, but he dumps them in the well. And that's one shot of them in the bottom of the well.
Yes.
It's creepy.
Yes.
It's real creepy. That's adult. This is an adult Abbott and Costello movie. Really.
Oh, yeah.
That's unsettling. Very unsettling. So, okay, they dump him in the well because Robert Barrett, that great actor who was wonderful in pre-code films especially, he plays Major Putnam. And he does a curse over the well. He says,
"Hear me, ye faithless souls. May you lie there in everlasting torment with but one name to identify your rotting bones. Traitors. And unless some evidence proves us wrong, I curse your miserable spirits to be bound to Danbury Acres till crack of doom."
Okay, so boy, this is not a musical. So they immediately rise out of the well as ghosts. And Lou, of course, goes over and takes a drink, and the water comes out of his bullet hole, which is something Matthew noticed in his chapter, that they might have added that. That might have been John Grant, Could be. So I'm going to give myself $5. So the thing is, the reason we say that is that in the very next scene, he's completely dry. You know what I mean? So it wasn't really planned very well. But anyway, they realize that they are ghosts. And they knew that the letter from George Washington must be in the house. When they look at the house, it's burning down.
Mm-hmm.
The soldiers burned down the house, and the soldiers were looting the house. So all the furniture was going out, everything that was inside, mostly everything, was being looted. So they're stuck. They're stuck for eternity in this place. Now, the next scene is probably the most bizarre in the entire movie, and I think you'll agree with me. First of all, the transition scene on the trees,
Yes.
as the passage of time, is one of the most beautiful scenes in any Abbott and Costello movie.
Yes, I would go so far as to say in any movie. It was one of
Isn't
the
that
better
beautiful?
methods used for showing the passage of time. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's all carvings on trees, with the year. Beautifully done.
Mm-hmm.
But then you see them sitting in their tree next to each other, and Melody is horny. It's been 165 years of none of that, and she is coming on to Horatio. Oh, darling, and she's playing with his ear and whispering, and and of course he's 12 years old. But they do a variation on the animal crackers joke when Groucho says, I've always wanted to ask you, will you wash out a pair of socks for me? To Margaret Dumont. And this one, it's...
Melody, there's just one thing I want to ask you.
Oh, yes.
If I...
Oh, what is it?
Melody?
Yes?
No, I can't. Sounds foolish coming from a fat man.
Oh, no, Horatio, tell me.
You really want to hear it?
Yes.
Melody, would you
I what?
Would you scratch my back tonight?
And she pushes him off the tree, and that's the end of the scene. The only thing I don't understand is that the next few scenes, she calls him darling. Really, darling, we can get into the house. Okay, darling, it's all right. What were they thinking? I mean, was the movie supposed to go in a different direction, or it's very unusual?
Yeah, because it ends almost as abruptly as it begins.
Yes, and then it's gone.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I mean, it's really interesting. The other interesting thing is her Tom Danbury, not only is a traitor, but he kidnaps Nora. And I used to think when I was a kid, why would she want him back? Through the whole movie, she's talking, oh, my Tom, I love my Tom. He was a traitor and a kidnapper. I realized that only later, and I guess I missed this, but only later she finds his diary.
Yep.
And supposedly he made retribution, and he says, I love my girl, and I screwed her over, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
He mentions Nora, he mentions Horatio. Anyway, supposedly that it redeems him, and she's okay with that. I still find it kind of weird. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. Earlier, by the way, I don't know if you noticed this, but when Lou is telling Nora in the barn where he had been recently, one of them is Barton's barn. Barton. Yeah. And
I didn't notice that.
I know he threw that in. I just know he threw that in. So they are ghosts, and they decide that they are going to haunt the people that have come. Now, who are the people that have come? Now, here's another question for you, Jerry.
Yes.
Only upon reading about this film do I realize that John Shelton's character, who is basically, the lead guy there, is a playwright. Did you get that at all?
No.
Nor did I. Apparently he's a playwright, and a successful one at that.
Okay.
Because he's had the original house reconstructed to the last detail, including the original furniture, mostly.
Yeah.
And some of it is in a museum in town, but he puts it all together again. Now let's talk about the people that are coming to open this house now. And Lou and Melody are not happy about it. They want them out. So we're talking about John Shelton, who is the playwright. First, let's talk about Marjorie Reynolds, okay? Because she really is, other than Lou in this movie, she's the most important person.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm going to say even more than Bud in this movie. She was born in 1917 in Buell, Idaho. Her name was Marjorie Goodspeed. Isn't that something? Good speed.
Yeah.
I wonder if she got some. But anyway, born in 1917, passed away 80 years later, in 1997. She moved to L.A. when she was 3. Apparently, her parents came looking for her. She made a few silent movies as a child. In 1933, she started doing bit parts in films. She was still very young, quite young. And then, she did things like Chorus Girl in Paramount films. Her first speaking role was 1937 in a movie called Murder in Greenwich Village. She made a lot of Westerns. She made the Mr. Wong movies at Monogram with Boris Karloff and Grant Withers. And then she went to Paramount, and she made the movie that made her famous, was Holiday Inn, with Bing Crosby and Fred Astaire, Irving Berlin score, and of course White Christmas was introduced. She was there, but Martha Mears sang for her. I don't know how many people knew that, but yeah, she was dubbed. Anyway, her mentor was the great Mark Sandrich, the director Mark Sandrich, who was one of my favorite directors. But he passed away very young, and that kind of derailed her career. He was helping her, and without that help, she kind of fell into supporting roles. She was in Fritz Lang's Ministry of Fear with Abbott and Costello regular Hilary Brooke. And she's probably most famous for playing Chester Riley's wife for 5 seasons on The Life of Riley. But she was wonderful. She's wonderful in this film, and you fall in love with her. She's just amazing. And when she shakes her body to disappear, I'm saluting. It's just fantastic. They actually heard from the Breen office about that they shouldn't make that too sexy. Yeah, good old Bobby Breen. So John Shelton is there. He's the playwright. Apparently his character had a nervous breakdown and is there to relax. It is his place to go and just regenerate himself, his nerves. And he's under the care of Dr. Ralph Greenway. My second favorite character in the movie. He's so funny and he's so lovable, and Bud is just amazing. I'm going to get to that for a second. His entrance, by the way, I don't know if you noticed this. We're going to talk about it.
Okay.
Benny Barnes plays the aunt of our leading lady, Lynn Baggett. Benny Barnes was a major supporting star, I'm going to say. I call them character stars. She's one of those. She was born in 1903 in Islington, Great Britain. She was a chorus girl, a dance hostess, and a nurse before she decided to go into the show business. She made a 1923 early sound film with Dr. Lee DeForest, who'd had the phonofilms and actually developed what they ended up using eventually after they ran him into bankruptcy, the major studios. Poor guy. And she was in The Private Life of Henry VIII, the Academy Award-winning film for Charles Laughton. She played Catherine Howard. And she's in my favorite version of The Three Musketeers, starring the Ritz brothers. And she said in a later interview with Leonard Maltin that she learned everything she knew about comedy from the Ritz brothers. She was married to Mike Frankovich, was her second husband, and he was the adopted son of Joe E. Brown, who put him through college and got him his start. But he also has an Abbott and Costello connection. He was the radio announcer in Buck Privates during the war games. So he was there. And Benny Barnes worked all the way up until 1973. 40 Carats was the movie. And she made 2 of my favorite movies when I was a kid, Where Angels Go, Trouble Follows, and The Trouble with Angels. She was in both of those. John Shelton, born in 1915 in Los Angeles, actually, passed away very young in 1972. He was married 5 times. Once to Catherine Grayson, who has an Abbott and Costello connection from Rio Rita. And this is the most amazing thing about him. He died mysteriously in a Sri Lanka prison in 1972. And nobody knows why, nobody knows what. They just know that he died in a Sri Lanka prison. Now, that just makes me want to watch everything he's done because that's just fascinating.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
But we haven't gotten to the best yet. Okay, get ready for this one.
Okay.
First of all, there's Jess Barker, who plays Tom Danbury. He's very good in the movie. He was born in 1912 in Greenville, South Carolina. Passed away in 2000 at the age of 88. He was married to Susan Hayward in 1944. They had twins. But then when they were divorcing later on, there was a huge custody battle in the newspapers every day, and it hurt his career in films. From here on in, it was supporting roles and a lot of radio. He lost the custody to the twins, and in 1956, he lost a paternity suit against another actress. I forget her name, nobody I knew. And he lost that one, had to support that child, and then eventually died of liver failure in 2000. But let's talk about Lynn Baggett, who plays the fiancée of John Shelton's character.
Yep.
She was born in 1923 in Wichita Falls, Texas. I didn't know there was a Wichita Falls in Texas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. Okay, get ready. This is the one. As a young lady, she went from working in a department store in Los Angeles to being signed by Warner Brothers. An agent saw her, thought she was beautiful, didn't know what kind of talent she had, but she got a contract at Warner Brothers, did mostly bit parts, uncredited, was in Manpower with George Raft and Edward G. Robinson. She was in Mildred Pierce, a small role as a waitress. And then she was signed by Universal in 1946, and she made this film. She married producer Sam Spiegel in 1948. He only stuck around for 2 years before he deserted her, but they divorced 7 years later, by the way. She was fired by Universal for her cocaine use and alcoholism.
Wow.
Yeah. And then in 1954, she was involved in a hit and run accident where she killed a 9-year-old boy. She ran away. They found her, and she was given 60 days in jail and 3 years of probation. Pretty light, pretty lenient. If you ask me. So after her first suicide attempt in 1957, she actually got stuck in a fold-away bed for 6 days without food or water.
Wow. Well,
I'm sorry. I'm laughing, but
no. It's hard to take that seriously. It really is. Wow.
Welcome to the fold. Yeah, oh boy, she became like a human origami subject. But yeah, she was there for 6 days before they found her totally hungry and dehydrated.
Yeah.
Yeah. She went from Abbott and Costello to hungry and dehydrated. So anyway, that happened. And then eventually they found her dead from a barbiturate overdose in 1960. And yeah, she was very young at the time. What is it, 37? I think she was 37. Poor woman. Anyway, she had the most fascinating story. I couldn't wait to get that to you. So anyway, these guys are all coming in to take over the house, to open it up. They're going to open it up for tourists on Saturdays. And Lou is not happy about this. He wants them out. Tonight, I haunt. That's what he says. I love that. Did I mention that this started on Lou's 40th birthday?
No.
March 6th, 1946, Lou's 40th birthday. And his daughter showed up with a cake and surprised him. And it was a very happy day. Very happy first day. So they're in. They're opening up the house. And they wait till midnight to go in and haunt, because no self-respecting ghost goes in before midnight. And they start doing what they do, but not before Benny Barnes has the most famous line in the film. This reminds me of It Ain't Hay, when they gave Shemp the line about Damon Runyon.
Yes.
How do I know? What do I know? I'm a Damon Runyon character. This was Benny Barnes walks in and sees the next big cast member. And in fact, maybe my third favorite character in the movie, Gail Sondergaard, plays Emily, the maid, and she's on another planet. She's from she's ghostly, she's eerie, she's eerie. And Benny Barnes walks in and looks at her and says,
"Oh, pardon me, but didn't I see you in Rebecca?"
Now, I wonder how many people would get that today, because it's obviously Mrs. Danvers, Judith Anderson's great performance as Mrs. Danvers in Rebecca. So she does that and gets away with it. And it's usually a big laugh, Gail Sondergaard, fascinating story. She was born in 1899 in Litchfield, Minnesota. And she lived to 1985. She won the very first Best Supporting Actress Oscar in 1936, for Anthony Adverse. She went on to play characters much like the one she's playing here. Mm-hmm. She played characters like the Spider Woman. She played very, very sinister characters. She was villainous in Sherlock Holmes film, the Spider Woman she played. And so she played characters like that.
Wasn't she also MGM's first choice for Wizard of Oz for the Wicked Witch?
She was the first one tested.
Yeah.
They wanted her at first to be a glamorous witch because she was an attractive woman, despite everything. She was an attractive woman. So they made her look very glamorous, but then they decided they were going to put the big nose on her and the wart and the chin. And she said, no. She said, I won't do that. It's going to hurt my career. So they got Margaret Hamilton, and now Margaret Hamilton is immortal. And, Gail Sondergaard is Mrs. Danvers. She marries, her second husband is Herbert Biberman. And he's the brother of Abner Biberman, the actor and eventually director. Herbert Biberman is a writer and director, and he is one of the Hollywood 10. The House Un-America Committee put him in jail with the other 9. And poor Gail she was blacklisted as well, and had to go to New York and do theater while her husband couldn't find work. So they did that to them, the horrible people in charge. And so she came back in 1969 and did some films and television. She was originally a Shakespearean actress. She toured in Shakespearean shows. Then she landed in New York and did some Broadway. She was in the Life of Emile Zola with Paul Muni. And she made a lot of movies with Bob Hope. She was hilarious in a movie called Never Say Die, written by Preston Sturges, by the way. She was in Cat and the Canary, another horror comedy. She was in My Favorite Blonde, which is, I consider, the very first real Bob Hope movie. And she did a road picture with Bob and Bing and Dorothy. She did Road to Rio. I hate you. I loathe you. I despise you. She's very good in that. But anyway, so she's been around. She has a great pedigree, and she's fabulous in this movie. Okay, so they're haunting, and Lou gets to abuse Bud now. Bud hears them downstairs. Here's the ghosts playing around downstairs, and he decides to, come downstairs and check it out. But I'm forgetting. Do you remember I told you that Bud couldn't drive? Did I tell you this? No, I don't. Bud couldn't drive. He did not drive because of his epilepsy. He was deathly afraid. So he had a chauffeur to take him everywhere. But in this movie, he had to drive. So they had to teach him. They built him this electric car for the studio, for him to get around the studio. And he drove all around, and it was easy. It was an electric car. Mm-hmm. So he learned how to steer it and everything, and then it was supposed to help him with the actual car in the film. But his introduction as Dr. Greenway is that he drives up in a car in the driveway and he stops. But he stops like an amateur driver. He hits the brake too hard and you hear, and you just know that Bud can't drive. Watch it. Go back and watch his entrance. I guarantee it. You'll see it. So Bud goes downstairs to see what's going on, and he is treated in a very ghostly fashion. Mm-hmm. His hair is darker in this one. Did you notice that Greenway has, it's almost black hair with eyebrows too, to match. Nice toupee in this one. Mm-hmm. I love where they're at the front door, the two ghosts, and Lou doesn't see her. And he turns around and he does a scared take that is so funny and so surprising, because everything has been kind of gentle up to now. Everything has been, not so slapsticky. But when he does it, it's like, bam, out of the blue. And just the surprise of it it's fun. Oh, God. There's times where he just turns around and walks into a door, and it's just great. It's just great. Okay, Bud's upstairs before he hears them. He's upstairs taking his pills, Now, be reasonable, be calm. He's talking himself down because he hears stuff downstairs. So he goes down, and one of my favorite effects is when they get into the house. They go through the window, and there's a Davenport down by the window, and Lou gets stuck in it. And it's a beautiful scene. You see his top part coming out of the top of it, and you see his legs coming out the bottom of it, and the middle of him is inside. It's a great effect, and it's very funny and surprising, actually. So anyway, his legs are sticking out. It looks very funny. And they realize that the electricity, the lights, they were candles when they knew the house. But she hits a switch. Melody hits a switch and all the lights come on. And I think it's very cute that she says, this must be one of Ben Franklin's idea. He was always inventing things. And he did harness electricity. He didn't wear it like a harness, but No. But anyway, Lou thinks, or I should say Horatio thinks, that Dr. Greenway is Cuthbert. And just like he thought that Bud's character, the nice character, was Mr. Morrison, the bad guy in Little Giant, it's almost the same thing. He just he thought it was Cuthbert. So he starts abusing him like crazy. It's very funny. How can I put this? He looks at Cuthbert, who he thinks is Cuthbert, and he's like, Cuthbert! Melody, it's Cuthbert, and he's still alive.
How can he be?
I don't know. They say only the good die young.
So that explains it in his mind. So anyway, Bud is ignoring Lou. Lou is obviously there with Bud on the set, but Bud can't acknowledge him because he's a ghost. And they do this wonderful thing where Bud is trying to find a cigarette and light a cigarette, and Lou is imitating all his actions right next to him. And it's really neat. And at one point, he goes to kick him in the butt, and Bud turns around just in time to miss it. But then he turns around again, and Lou gives him a shot and sends him flipping over the chair. Now, I guarantee that was Norman Abbott and not Bud, but still, he goes over, and it's very funny. And then Emily comes in, Gail Sondergaard, and Bud thinks that Emily kicked him, which, doesn't really play. But anyway, when Lou turns around and sees Emily for the first time and goes, it's Botkins, what well did she come out of? It was very funny. So anyway, the harpsichord was played also. I love the sound of a harpsichord. It's just beautiful. And Bud goes over to look at it, and he hits a few notes, turns around, and then they hit some notes, and that's what sends him running out of the room. So anyway, they start searching for the letter from George Washington. They're looking all over the place. Lou guarantees that it's not in the clock, which is exactly where they hid it. But I've been a tinker my whole life. I guarantee there's not a drawer in a clock. So he actually impedes their search. And there's a great moment where Lou is standing there, and you see his shadow on the wall. And the way they disappear is they shake, and Lou's pants usually fall down when he's shaking. That's a running gag through the whole movie. I don't know if you noticed that, but his pants are so loose. But anyway, he disappears, but his shadow is still there. And then you hear him whistle, his whistle, and the shadow disappears. So it's a very cute moment. So anyway, they mess around with Bud some more, and Lou even sings into his stethoscope. Da, 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 the fox hunt melody. And then the dress on the stairway. While they were looking for the letters, Melody goes upstairs and notices a beautiful strapless gown in the closet. And she takes it out and she looks at it. And then you cut away, and there's more business between Bud and Lou. And as Binnie Barnes, who has been down there, by the way, she's checking things out. She hears the radio, which is important because the radio scares Horatio and Melody. They don't know what it is or who the voices are. And the radio tells them to put their hands up. So they put their hands up. And they said, okay, now I want you to blow. In other words, I want you to leave. Gangster talk. So they both start blowing. Right? It's very, very cute. But anyway, the people upstairs hear the radio downstairs, and they all come down. And when they finally decide that this is all their imagination, they should all go back to bed, Minnie Barnes, who is the most skeptical, starts her way up the stairs, but she sees the dress walking downstairs, and it's just the dress.
Mm-hmm.
And it's filled, obviously, with a very nice body, but it's coming down. And the way they did it, they had to put a skin-tight black velvet bodysuit on the actress. It may not have been Marjorie Reynolds. We don't know. Probably not. But covers her head as well. So when they shot it the first time, it was with the black velvet, and then they shot it again and whatever. And she looked invisible. So they had to shoot it twice, her coming down the stairs. And it's a beautiful, beautiful effect. And of course, Minnie Barnes faints dead away. The dress comes down, and you just see the shoes running upstairs, So that was a little, that was tantalizing when I was a child. But we now know that she was covered in black velvet. There's a scene where they're all talking about how frazzled they are. I mean, the real people. Mm-hmm. And they went through this whole thing with the brandy. Bud went through the whole thing. The ghosts are lifting the brandy and scaring him. But there's a scene where there's three people there: Bud, Minnie Barnes, and John Shelton. And one grabs the brandy, turns around. The other one grabs the brandy, turns around. The other one grabs the brandy. And then I think it goes back to Bud at the end. But anyway, it's a very nice little moment, a nice piece of business. Okay, one of my favorite scenes, and I came up with the idea that this was a visual pun. And I'm not even sure if they knew they were doing it. When Lou is downstairs in the basement looking around, mm-hmm. and he hits the generator, and he becomes electrocuted from the generator, and he picks up this bulb, this long mm-hmm. bulb, and it lights up immediately because he's so full of electricity. And as he's trying to shake it away, you hear this orchestra playing like he's conducting. The orchestra. It's beautiful. But he's an electronic conductor. Get it?
Oh!
He's an electrical conductor.
Oh!
I don't know who put that together or whether that was intentional or not, but it makes perfect sense.
It does now. Yeah, I hadn't even gone there, but yes, it does.
Yes. Our listeners, did you have come up with that? I don't know. Maybe because I'm such a punster. Such a wordplay guy that, I put it together. I don't know. But I love where he runs out, he disappears, and you only see the lighted bulb going through the house and then outside the front door. And then he sees the dog who's outside, and the dog chases him. And when Lou reappears, the dog's eyes cross and he runs away. Arr, 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 arr. It's a nice effect. It's almost too realery,
Yep.
In fact, the dog looks like Laughing Gravy, actually. The Laurel and Hardy dog.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we have that effect, and the dog is, scared. And then we come to what is one of my favorite parts of the movie, and that's the seance. Mm-hmm. This is such a great scene, and for my money, the best seance in any film ever. The only other one I can think of really is Ed Wood, Night of the Ghouls. Oh. There's an incredible seance scene that's more funny than anything else, unintentionally.
Yes.
Yeah. So Bud says at one point, "Okay, we have to make our minds completely blank." And Minnie Barnes says, "That should be easy for you." Bud is the butt of the joke, the bud of the joke. And I love when Lou, I think he knocks him over at one point, and Bud says, "Why are they always picking on me?" So, okay, they're doing the seance. Now, this is incredible. Emily, the very supernatural housekeeper, who always knows when the ghosts are around. So she's running the seance, and what they gather, because Marjorie Reynolds runs to another room and gets a painting of herself and brings it into the seance, they know that Melody Allen is one of the ghosts. Okay? Mm-hmm. Now, they have to find out who Lou is, who Horatio is. And so they do the poem, what is it? Soldier,
rich
sailor,
man, poor man, beggar man, thief.
Beggar man, thief.
Yeah.
Sailor, soldier, Omar Sharif.
Yeah.
So I think it's
close enough.
Like yeah, I think so. So they finally find out he's the Tinker. And John Shelton remembers reading Tom Danbury's memoirs, and he mentions a tinker. And then they go back and they figure out who they are and what they have to do. So they have to find the letter. They have to find the letter from George Washington so the ghosts can be free and they could live in the house without any haunting. So all of a sudden, Emily starts talking like Tom Danbury. Melody, melody. Now, if that isn't memorable to you, from childhood, this scene is so great.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, Melody says, "Oh, that's my Tom." And Lou looks at Emily and says, "You were going to marry her?" So anyway, things are starting to wrap up. They realize that the letter is in the clock, and Tom gives them the combination: once to 12, twice to 3, and then 1 10 after 1. I can't believe I remembered that.
Yeah.
I could open the clock. So anyway, they realize that the clock is one of the few pieces that isn't the original, and that the original is at the museum, but they won't let John Shelton anywhere near it because he's such a lunatic about getting all these wonderful originals, and they're afraid he's going to steal it. So Bud says, "I'm going to go get it. I have to make up to these 2 ghosts. That's why they're picking on me. It's because of my relative Cuthbert, and I'm going to make up for what Cuthbert did to them." And I love that. I just love that Bud, redeems everything.
Yeah.
So he goes into the city, and he has a great scene on his own where he asks the docent or whoever it is, "Can I please just look at the clock? Can I open the thing?" And they're like, "No, you can't touch it. This is an original. I'm sorry." The next scene, we see Bud leaving and passing security with an enormous stomach. And obviously he's got the clock under his coat. And he's so good in this. The cop stops him and says, Is that all you under the coat? And then he says, "Oh, yes, I've got to watch my diet. I'm, whatever." And then all of a sudden the chimes from the clock start ringing. And he looks at his watch and says, "Oh, well, it's time for my tonic," or whatever it is. And I've got to go. And he leaves, and he gets away with it. So he pretends to drive back to the and the cops are on to him. So he's racing to Danbury Manor to get there first. And he gets there. He gets there with the clock. And he runs into the barn with the clock. And the ghosts are with him, and they can't wait. They just can't wait. And he's trying to remember the combination, and they're waiting, "Come on, please do it." And he can't hear them. So anyway, the door opens for like a second. But when Lou goes to get the letter, it closes immediately. So he couldn't get it. And the cops come. And one of them, of course, is our dear favorite, jumping butterballs, Donald McBride. Now, I think in his 4th Abbott and Costello movie, or 3rd?
Third, yes.
3rd. And
Third.
then he's coming in Buck Privates Come Home.
Yep.
So that'll be his 4th. But he's wonderful, and he's very funny.
Oh, yeah.
He does some funny stuff with Bud in the backseat of the car. So what happens here is they arrest Bud. Bud's in handcuffs. He's in the back of the car. It's an open car, a convertible. And Donald McBride is sitting next to him in the back seat, and the other cop is driving. But they can't get out because Lou is in the back of the car, and they can't get out. They're ghosts. They can't. That's part of the thing. So there's no way that the car will go out. So what happens is they get out of the car, and Bud is still in the back seat, but Lou tries to drive it, but you can't see him. He's a ghost. So the car is driving all over the area, all over the land, with no driver, and Bud in the back in handcuffs, and he's bouncing around and this and that. And finally it hits a tree, and Bud goes flying out of the car on wires, of course. And Lou, of course, gets shot into the tree where he has the steering wheel in his hands. And the clock opens up. They find the clock. It opens up. They find the letter, and they're free. They're free. And, Bud is exonerated. It's all fine. Everybody's good. And they just feel great that they're able to end this curse. Now, well, first of all, Bud is in this car, and he's not a driver. How did they do the driving? That this car is driving all over the place, and there's clearly no driver in the driver's seat. There was a studio guy sitting under the passenger seat in the back, under it, stretched out. His legs are stretched out in front of him. You don't see them. They're underneath. Mm-hmm. And he's got a little steering wheel he's using. And they must have used something like a periscope or something like that, because he could see. He's driving around like crazy. Really brilliant, a really great effect. And then, please forgive me, everyone. This is ridiculous. I'm going all over the place, but there's a gag that I just love in this movie that I did not mention. Okay. And that's when Melody and Horatio run through each other and switch clothing. It is such a great gag and so beautifully done. It's just fantastic. It is just fantastic. And it's not in the script. It was an afterthought. Yeah. How about that?
Yeah.
One of the great gags, and it always gets a huge laugh. Happens.
Yeah. I was saying that my wife sat in on most of this movie with me yesterday. She's not a huge Abbott and Costello fan, but she enjoys comedy and likes old movies. But anyway, in the scene where Melody's trying on the gown, my wife made a comment about, well, are ghosts able to take off their clothing and change their clothing? And I thought, just wait a few minutes. And then when this gag happened, when they run through each other and change their outfit, she was on the floor.
Oh, it's great. It is a great gag. This whole movie is just on another level. It's just on another level. In their top three, maybe. I think top three. Mm-hmm. Mine is Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, Who Done It, and this one as my favorites, I think.
Yeah.
So anyway, Bud is not in the car anymore. And I hate to do this to you, Jerry, but Kevin Brownlow he knew we were doing this film this week, and he had some audio footage of Bud getting his first driving lesson at the studio.
Okay.
They actually hired a driving teacher to teach Bud how to drive. And we have a short clip of him doing this, and it didn't work out too well, but we'll see. Well, I'll show you. Hold on. Let me just... There it is. Okay, hold on 1 second. All right, I'm ready to go. Let's do this. I'm up for it. I'm up for it.
All right, Mr. Rabbit. Listen, first things first, you've got to put on a safety belt, all right? Just slap that on. Ow, that hurt. What are you doing?
I'm sorry. When I hear that word slap, it's like a knee-jerk reaction. I'm sorry. So just don't do that again. Okay.
All right, now just put the flap over. Ow, I said flap, not slap.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry. Sorry about that. It sounded like slap.
Slap? Ow, what are you doing? Oh, why are you pulling this crap? Ow, I said crap.
I'm terribly... That's all we have. We never left the driveway that day. And the man was treated for injuries.
Okay.
Yeah. It's funny that his first driving lesson was more of a hit and run, Why bring Lynn Baggett up again? You can't box it, Baggett. All right. So we're coming to what I feel is the most beautiful scene in any Abbott and Costello film.
Yes.
One of the most beautiful scenes in any film I've seen. When they say goodbye to each other, they're finally, after 165 years of being together every single moment, they have to say goodbye. And there's a moment there, and this is why I love Lou Costello.
Goodbye, Horatio. I'm going to miss you.
Goodbye, Melody. I'm going to miss you, too. But don't you worry. Just as soon as Nora and I get set, we'll have you and Tom over for dinner. I'll have Nora bake a nice big angel cake.
And she kisses him and walks away. And it's sort of a shot from above. You see Lou, his full body, it's almost like a long shot. And as she's walking away, he lifts his coat and he wipes his eyes with the end of his coat. It's little moments like these that make Lou Costello someone I love very much. He's got genius in him, that man. Anyway, so he does that, and then he hears Nora saying, Horatio, Horatio, and he starts walking up this beautifully lit. It's just beautiful. It's very difficult to explain. You have to see it. It's almost like diamonds are shining everywhere. And apparently they used diamond dust to get the effect on Lou's coat, that, all this sparkly stuff. And it works very well. And he walks up to the pearly gates, and there's Nora waiting for him. And remind me to tell you the original ending. And another scene, by the way, that was cut. But she says, oh, it's so good to see you. I missed you, blah, blah, blah. And he says, oh, please let me in. Should we spoil this ending? It's such a beautiful ending.
I'm torn on this one because, I'm assuming if people are listening now, they've seen the film.
Yeah.
In which case we wouldn't be spoiling it per se. But with this intro, I think we're far enough past it that if anybody hasn't, they can stop listening for a second or two. So, yeah.
Okay, so spoiler alert. He says, well, let me in. And she says, I can't. And he goes, why? And she looks over, and he looks over, and there's a big sign lit up that says, closed for George Washington's birthday. I'm sorry, I'm going to let that set in. It's such a great ending. And he turns to the camera and just says,
Odds Watkins.
in pure frustration after 165 years. It's such a beautiful ending. It's such a beautiful movie.
Yes. It really is. It really is. And before I remind you to get to those other things, something I wanted to see if you noticed. As they are about to leave the estate, finally.
Yes.
There is a moment. It can't be more than 5 seconds of this shot where Lou gets his coat caught on a bramble bush and he can't get out and he thinks he's still stuck.
Yeah.
It all looks like, studio shot, but there's like 5 seconds of brightly lit exterior location.
I noticed that too.
And that's all they used.
That's it. But it kind of works. You know what I mean? It kind of works. It's just a little unusual.
Yeah.
It's unusual visually. How interesting. So anyway, the ending supposedly has her with Cuthbert and him chasing after Cuthbert or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but I'm glad they didn't do it.
No.
But the scene that I'm sorry the Breen office put the kibosh on was Melody is talking to Lou about things that might have been had they lived. Mm-hmm. And Lou starts talking about, well, yes, I would have my children. I would name one George Washington Jr. And then you see a little kid with Lou's face, right? Dressed like George Washington. Then there'd be Thomas Jefferson Jr. And you'd see someone, same thing with Lou's face. And then someone else, blah, blah, blah. And then finally he says, and then, of course, Horatio Jr. And it's a little kid. It turns around and it's Cuthbert. And the Breen office said, no way. Although Bob Hope and Bing Crosby got away with it in Road to Utopia, right?
Yep.
We adopted him. Yeah. When Bing Crosby walks in, Bud and Lou couldn't get away with it. It's such a funny gag. It is so funny. And something Cuthbert would be capable of.
Yes.
So anyway, that is the deep dish dive into this wonderful film. Mm-hmm. I have one thing to say as a addendum to this, because I'm a little disturbed by it. I've been hearing lately, as we advertise, our podcast and our love for Bud and Lou and all of that, they are not especially well liked. I'm learning. They have their audience, and you're all listening, guys, and God bless you for doing that. But I'm hearing more and more, they're not my favorites. And then you see like drawings of the great classic comedians, and they're left out. It's like Joe Adamson kind of did that too in his book Groucho Harpo Chico and Sometimes Intro. Zeppo. He writes in the Big Store chapter, we had this, we had that, and of course Abbott and Costello. Very condescending. No offense, Joe, but he's one of my dear friends. But anyway, they just are not as well thought of. I know this thing goes in cycles and all that, but I watched a documentary about Laurel and Hardy last night. It was called Cuckoo, and it's from 1974. It was one of the first things on HBO, and I watched it about 20 times, I remember, back then. But anyway, I'm watching it, and as I'm listening to Dick Van Dyke and Jerry Lewis and Marcel Marceau, and they're all pompous and especially Jerry. Jerry's like, you can't understand what he's talking about. He's doing Jerry speak. The whole thing was very good when they did it, and they did the whole thing. But they're talking like, how can I put this? Stan knew the human condition, and he taught the American public, with a spoonful of sugar, with a comedy, he taught the public what the American condition was like, and blah, blah, blah. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. He went to work and he made comedy. That's what he did. He wanted to make us laugh. That's what he did. I'm a little tired of all of this.
Yep.
They were no different from Abbott and Costello. They wanted to go and make you laugh. And that was that. But the main difference is people feel that Laurel and Hardy, their characters actually loved each other, and that there was no way they were ever going to split up, no matter what happens to either one of them or what they do to each other. They were always going to come out together. And that's true. Bud and Lou didn't have that. I mean, they had it in some of their movies. They were buds and they were, always together. Yeah. But chances are Bud would have sold them out, within seconds if it progressed his fortune. But that's no different from Bing Crosby with Bob Hope. Why do they get away with it and Bud and Lou don't? I don't know, folks. I'm hoping the cycle will go around because we're talking about one of the comic geniuses of the 20th century and the best straight man who ever lived. That's not too shabby. Let me put it this way. They are the only classic comedy team to be in the top 10 box office and to be number 1 in the box office. Laurel and Hardy never did. Martin and Lewis never did. Alan and Rossi never did. Hello there. So I'm just in here for Bud and Lou. We're here for Bud and Lou. Yeah. And that's it. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I hope you all had a great Christmas and Hanukkah. Hanukkah is still going on. What day is it? Was it 5 or something? 5 out of the 8?
I think we are on 5, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I hope everybody's having a great time. And I just want to say that the day after New Year's, I'm leaving on a extended trip. Actually, not extended. It's about 2 weeks. I'm going to Albania, the Balkan country of Albania. It's the size of Maryland. It's got about 3 million people. And I am going to be checking it out to see if it's a place I want to retire. Prices are a third of what we pay here on everything. I could live for less than $1,000 a month, live like a king. And that would leave me, because I have a pension and my Social Security and whatever savings I have, I will have money to travel all over Europe if I like this place. So wish me luck, and I will let you know how it goes. Jerry?
Yes.
I just want to say that, again, I look forward to this every month. I should say every 2 weeks.
Yep.
We have Buck Privates Come Home next. It's going to be recorded. I'm going to be away. We usually record on Sundays, so we're probably going to take an extra week before we get to Buck Privates Come Home. But we will be back, and we will do the deep dish dive, with Buck Privates Come Home. Okay, so everybody, please have a safe and happy New Year's Eve and New Year's. Try to stay off the roads. It's dangerous out there. And I'll be thinking of you guys when I'm in Albania, and I will see you when I get back. And I'm going to change my name to Albania.
So we can call you Al. Okay.
They say, don't you remember? You called me Al. It was Al all the time. Say, don't you remember? I'm your pal. Brother, can you spare 10 cents? Oh, wait. That doesn't go. No,
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll get back to you.
I have a dance I do. Okay. All right. I'll see myself out. Bye, everybody. Take good care and Happy New Year.